Dear listeners, this is Outlier the Radio, 102.7 FM CFRO Vancouver Co-op radio station. This 12 December was 65th anniversary of the declaration of the South Azerbaijani national government in Iran, and here is an article about that, about the independent South Azerbaijan 1945 to 1946. In 1945, in southern Azerbaijan, the Azerbaijani language was banned from schools and government offices. Since the Azerbaijani language press shared the same fate, there were no Azerbaijani newspaper or magazine published. Students were forced to speak in Persian at schools. In the face of using their mother language, they were fined and whipped by their teachers or principals. The government-sponsored propaganda portrayed Azeris as barbarians. Azeris who want to climb up in state's hierarchy had to deny their ethnic background in order to assimilate the Azeris into Persian culture. Tehran was discouraging deliberately investment in Azerbaijan by making it hard to obtain permission to set up any fundamental industry there. Even in the case of obtaining permission, the cooperation of banking system could not be expected. As a result, thousands of people had to leave their homeland and settle in Persian cities to make a living. The economy was chaotic. In contrast to the majority of people who lived in abject poverty, there was a relatively small class of rich landowners and merchants. The people suffered from enormous difficulties in obtaining their essential needs such as bread. In comparison to other regions, the cost of living was much higher in Azerbaijan. The discrimination reached a point where people in Azerbaijan started putting questions such as, while the sugar ratio in the capital is 1.5 kilo per month, why is the ration for Azerbaijanis no more than 400 grams, and that's not per month, but rather per season? The political bureaucracy was corrupt, and the gendarmerie was nothing more than instrument in the hands of the landowners and suppress the peasants. The appointed officials from Tehran were more worried about their pockets than solving people's problem. Officials from the south find Tabriz and Urumia nothing more than dull villages, where they can make money and get back to Tehran, or anywhere down south. The worker had no rights. Not a single organization was allowed to defend their rights. Unions were outlawed. There was no freedom of speech. The press and radio were controlled by the central government. Azerbaijan was a microcosm of the conditions existing in Iran. People who know the fundamentals of revolution would agree the required subjective and objective conditions were ripe for a revolution in Azerbaijan. But most of the Persian scholars and their Western counterparts not taking into account of about situation. And listening into importance of socio-economic factors when it comes to the questions of Azerbaijan, have tried to label the revolution of the Azerbaijanis as a Soviet-sponsored intrigue. It is also interesting to note that the Persian liberal-minded scholars have a tendency of the portrait or paint themselves as internationalists when they are talking about other oppressed people around the world. However, when it comes to the question of Azeris in Iran, they put away their quasi-internationalist mask and display their despicable racist inclination. It can be seen in almost all of the so-called progressive Persian media's reaction during and after the formation of Azerbaijani democratic government. The following excerpt from the newspaper Iran Ma, means Our Iran, is just an example. In the view of our writers, it is perfectly obvious that the local language of Azerbaijan deserves respect. However, in our opinion, the local language of Azerbaijan can definitely not be the national language of our Azerbaijani fellow countrymen, because we do not consider the people of Azerbaijan to be a nation separate from our other fellow countrymen and ourselves. They said, the autonomous government of Azerbaijan 1945 to 1946. On September 3, 1945, the Azerbaijan Democratic Party was founded in Tabriz. 2 days later, the Azerbaijan Province Committee of the Iran People Party merged with it. Aware of Tehran's desire to crack down on the revolution in Tabriz, the Central Committee of the Azerbaijan Democrat Party called on the people to take up arms to defend their own government on November 9, 1945. Shortly thereafter, the party started setting up volunteer paramilitary units called Fedayis. On November 23, 1945, its Central Committee issued a proclamation defining its aim to the complete autonomy of Azerbaijan. On December 12, the Provincial National Assembly was formally inaugurated. It was composed of 101 deputies. On its first day of power, the National Parliament of Azerbaijan in Tabriz challenged the puppet government of the Shah in Tehran by declaring the autonomous government of Azerbaijan and designation a government under the premiership of Mir Jafar Peshawari, designed to safeguard the autonomy of Azerbaijan. The government declared that it had no intention of breaking away from Iran. Unlike the Soviet Azerbaijan, it didn't follow a massive nationalization program. Private property was respected. A people's army was formed from the local militia. Azerbaijani became the official language of the state. The government also declared that it would distribute government-owned land among the peasants, as well as that of the reactionary landlords who collaborated with the enemy and fled the country. Universal suffrage was recognized. Within a short period of time, schools were set up. The first medical school was opened in Tabriz. The roads were repaired, and an 8-hour workday was introduced. Within 1 year, the democratic government of Azerbaijan had done more good for Azerbaijan than Reza Shah had done in the last 20 years of his reign. The Azerbaijani crisis was the first to come before the Security Council on January 19, 1946. Sayyid Hassan Taqizadeh, head of Iranian delegation of the General Assembly and the Iranian ambassador to England, was instructed by Hakimi to refer Iran's complaint to the Security Council. Tehran was concerned about the Soviet political support for the autonomous government of Azerbaijan. Tehran's inability to suppress Azerbaijan prompted it to start negotiations with Tabriz. It also used diplomatic and economic tools to achieve its goal of eradicating the government in Tabriz. As all dictators do in the time of weakness, Tehran partially gave in to the Azerbaijani demands on June 1946 by signing a 15-point agreement which recognized some of the Azerbaijanis' demands. By appeasing Russia's demand of joint exploration of oil in the northern provinces and also pressuring them to evacuate their army through diplomatic means on the land which has the United States and UK support. Finally, Soviet forces started withdrawing from Azerbaijan on March 24, 1946. The evacuation was completed by May 9, 1946. Aware of Russia's behind-the-scene negotiations with Tehran, the Peshawari government started looking west of the border for help. In an emergency meeting of the National Parliament, the Prime Minister Peshawari told the deputies there were 3 alternatives left for the government. 1. Becoming united with Turkey. 2. declaring independence if Turkey was to help them become recognized by the foreign countries. This option was to be taken if the first one was thought of affecting Turkey's diplomatic relation negatively, and 3, continuing their struggle within Iran directly if Turkey refused the first 2 options. 3 emissaries were sent to Ankara and to discuss the situation with the Prime Minister of Turkey, İsmet İnönü. After staying for 3 months in Ankara, and giving all the military secrets of Azerbaijani army to Turkish officials, not only they were denied a meeting with the Prime Minister, but also they were sent back to Tehran, where they subsequently were executed. It's written by Orhan Mehmet, page 122. Finally, Tehran, getting green light from Moscow and Ankara, attacked Azerbaijan from 3 sides on December 12, 1946. The Iranian army committed horrible crimes. The Azerbaijani school books were set on fire, and according to some accounts, more than 50,000 people were killed. I have another thing from the book of the William O. Douglas. Is an American attorney, William O. Douglas, who was traveling in Azerbaijan shortly after the democratic movement. In his book names Strange Lands and Friendly People, notes, when the Persian army returned to Azerbaijan, it came with roar. Soldiers ran riot, looting and plundering, taking what they wanted. The Russian army had been on its best behavior. The Persian army, the army of the emancipation, was a savage army of occupation. It left a brutal mark on the people. The beards of peasants were burned, their wives and daughters raped, houses were plundered, livestock were stolen. The army was out of control. Its mission had been liberation, but it preyed on the civilian, leaving death and destruction behind. It's written by William O. Douglas, 1951, page 45.